Hey guys, tonight we wander into the quieter side of samurai life, far from clashing swords and thunderous battle cries. You probably imagine these armored warriors strictly roaming battlefields or standing stoically in armor, right? Well, guess what? You probably won't survive this if you think that's all they did. Samurai also thrived in peaceful routines, private rituals, and even hobbies that might surprise you. Imagine waking up not to the clang of swords, but the gentle dawn light spilling through paper screens as you trudge barefoot on tatami mats, brushing aside the morning's dew like a gardener smoothing bonsai. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a quick comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's part of this nocturnal adventure. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day in the life of a samurai actually starts well before the crack of dawn, even before the rooster crows or the neighborhood crows themselves. Samurai began mornings with ritual repetition, often involving cleaning on a scale that might surprise someone used to battlefield chaos. Harvested rice grains crunch underfoot as you silently tidy the entire household, from the polished wooden floors to the garden paths, setting order to counterbalance the unpredictability of life. Historians still argue whether these early morning rituals were merely practical or infused with spiritual significance, but rest assured, this wasn't your average brush your teeth and grab your coffee routine. For many samurai, there was an emphasis on readiness, not just for war, but for life as a whole. You might find yourself practicing kyudo, Japanese archery, at first light, drawing the bowstring with a meditative calm that oddly contrasts with how you'll feel hours later. Now, not all samurai were up at dawn practicing martial arts or cleaning. Many also took surprising pleasure in everyday domestic tasks, rinsing pottery, preparing incense, or tending to household sweets. It's a reality check. A samurai's day was packed, but it wasn't all lethal sword fighting. More often, it was about control, precision, and composure, skills useful when one's sword is sheathed. One quirky fact here: some samurai reportedly used early morning as a time to attune their senses by listening carefully to nature, the rustle of leaves, or the distant chirp of insects, a kind of mindfulness practice that echoes our modern meditation trends. The comparison might make you chuckle. Imagine a samurai listening to bird calls instead of stress messages on their phones. Such peaceful routines extended to grooming as well. Samurai paid particular attention to their hair, sometimes shaving and styling it in elaborate ways that could take hours, showing a keen sense of aesthetics tied to honor and appearance. Remember, your hairstyle wasn't just about vanity, it marked your social status and commitment to the samurai code. But here's where the story gets more interesting. Despite all this peaceful preparation, samurai needed to be battle ready. So their dawn routines were a kind of paradox, calmness masking the simmering tension of looming conflict. Whether bow practice or simply meditative breath control, these early hours shaped the emotional armor concealed beneath physical armor. Even the food you received at breakfast was deliberate, simple, nourishing, often dried fish and rice, fuel that respected body and spirit. Unlike modern fast food, a samurai's meal was mindful sustenance designed to enhance concentration and stamina over long days. In the background of all this, personal servants and assistants, known as koshu, helped manage the household chores, but samurai were expected to remain hands on and respectful of their surroundings. The ritual of tidiness wasn't just about cleanliness, it translated into an inner discipline you carried into battle or politics. So the dawn reveals a balance of ready calm and strict order, a practical sacredness that sets the tone for the rest of the day, shaping mindset and mood. You can almost hear the quiet certainty underlying the pre dawn stillness. What's remarkable is how these morning routines, though so peaceful, were part of the samurai's code, a daily reaffirmation that strength isn't just in muscle, but in focused calm. This challenges the classic image of a warrior forever raging into battle. Instead, it suggests a deeper philosophy. Physical power must always be paired with mental grace. And here comes a quirk for you. Some samurai reportedly practiced early morning cold water bathing in rivers or pools, not only to awaken the senses, but to cleanse the spirit. Picture that, plunging into chilly water before sunrise while your mind toggles between shock and mindfulness. Historians still argue whether such routines were widespread or reserved for elite clans, but the evidence points to a fascinating blend of ritual, practicality, and spiritual preparation. This morning rhythm wasn't just about being ready for battle, it was about facing life's unpredictability with clarity. So, tomorrow morning, as you hit snooze or scroll endlessly through your phone, spare a thought for the samurai who rose before light, embracing discipline and calm before the world even woke. Their secret weapon was often this ritual of quiet readiness, and trust me, it beats caffeine. That gentle, purposeful rhythm you settled into at dawn carries you seamlessly into the world of tea, a deceptively simple ceremony wrapped in layers of meaning and calm. As you shift from bow stretching to slowly pouring hot water, you step into the samurai's other battlefield, the artful quiet of tea time. The tea ceremony, or chinoyu, isn't merely about drinking matcha. It is a refined embrace of mindfulness, aesthetic appreciation, and subtle social signaling. So you probably won't survive this if you think it's just sipping powdered leaves in silence. There's a whole philosophy brewing beneath the surface. The tea ceremony originated with Zen monks, but soon became an essential leisure ritual for samurai, a pause from sword training or clan negotiations. You sit on tatami, your hands cradling the ceramic bowl that's either rough with wabi-sabi imperfection or exquisitely simple, designed to draw your full attention. The tea master's slow, deliberate movements choreograph the moment, each motion precise, intentional, poised with centuries-old tradition. Your senses awaken. The warm aroma of powdered green tea mingles with the pine-scented room, the sound of bamboo whisking, and the faint rustle of silk robes. Historians still argue whether the samurai's adoption of chinoyu was a genuine spiritual refuge or a form of genteel status performance masked in Zen philosophy. But either way, the ceremony helped the warrior class detach momentarily from the physical demands of their role, cultivating disciplined calm that mirrored martial focus. You might think of it as the original ASMR, sensory triggers designed to soothe the mind amid the chaos of conflict. An odd and almost quirky tidbit is that some tea masters crafted special koan inspired tea utensils, essentially tea tools shaped with cryptic carvings or asymmetrical designs meant to unsettle or provoke thought. Imagine being offered a tea bowl purposely missing a chunk and realizing that imperfection is beauty, a Zen lesson served hot. It's a sharp contrast to contemporary Western obsession with symmetry and perfection, much like your favorite slightly bent headphone wire. Besides the spiritual and artistic elements, tea ceremonies were also vital social occasions. Samurai clans used these moments to build alliances, negotiate minor disputes, and subtly display their wealth or taste, all couched beneath innocent hospitality. The etiquette was strict. How you accepted the bowl, the order of sips, the place setting, every detail was a coded language revealing honor and respect. Beyond that, the choice of tea itself conveyed messages. Matcha, or ground green tea, was not just a beverage. Its bitter and earthy flavor symbolized the samurai's readiness to accept life's hardships without complaint. And you might suppress a grin, imagining how many samurai grimaced at their first bitter sip, yet learned to appreciate the metaphorical toughness it demanded. In some cases, tea ceremonies were even part of mourning rituals, offering a gentle transition from battle grief to acceptance. The act of making and sharing tea helped samurai reconcile the violence of their lives with the desire for peace, a paradox as old as the code they followed. Some scholars debate how much the ceremony truly soothed the trauma of war, though. Did sitting still and sipping tea heal wounds, or just paper over them? The setting also played a vital role. Many tea rooms were constructed to mimic caves or small rustic huts, emphasizing humility and resistance to material excess. The tiny, low entrance forced guests to bow before entering, a symbolic surrender of pride, reminding the fierce warrior to shed rank and ego for a moment. Here's a quirky historical detail. Samurai sometimes carried tiny tea bundles with powdered tea and a whisk in their saddlebags on campaigns. After storming a castle or retreating from battle, they could brew tea virtually anywhere. No Starbucks required. You can just picture a sweaty samurai, armor half dented, calmly brewing matcha, a brief oasis in the midst of chaos. As the ceremony unfolded, the silence was punctuated only by the ritual, pouring, swallowing, and gentle words shared among participants. Samurai took great care, not only in their movements, but in the subtle communications layering each encounter, unpacking social hierarchies, and forging bonds that might outlive warfare itself. Tea ceremony tools, including the iron kettle, bamboo scoop, and silk cloth used for cleaning utensils, were treasured objects, often given names and passed down through generations. This careful preservation indicates the deep respect samurai had for tradition and the intangible heritage of calm focus. On the intellectual side, some tea masters experimented with choreographing ceremonies to disrupt predictable patterns, intentionally introducing irregular tempos or awkward pauses. This unpredictability mirrored the warrior's life, where control could never be absolute, and forced samurai to embrace uncertainty while remaining composed. Overall, the tea ceremony was a complex, multi-sensory sanctuary, anchoring samurai spirituality, social etiquette, and artistic aesthetics simultaneously. It was not just a break, it was a battlefield in its own right, fought with grace and subtle strength. As you sip this symbolic green liquid in your imagination, notice the warmth spreading through your hands, connecting you briefly to days long past, where warriors sought harmony through simplicity, listening deeply to the moment. And if your modern stress gets the best of you, perhaps now you understand why some samurai swore that tea was as essential as their sword. Picking up from that delicate tea ritual, you float straight into a rather unexpected dimension of samurai life, poetry and prose. You probably think samurai were all about grim, gritty sword fights and brooding stares, but the truth? They wielded words just as skillfully, crafting haikus and short verses that peeled back layers of their more stoic armor. Their pens often danced between the translucent and the pointed, occasionally revealing sharp wit or biting social commentary. So, while you may picture battle sourcing sabers, imagine instead the samurai hunched quietly over ink, composing couplets that capture fleeting moments and deeper emotions. In the highly stratified society of feudal Japan, samurai poetry wasn't mere leisure, it was a refined channel for expressing honor, sorrow, and even rebellion. You might find a samurai scribbling a haiku about falling cherry blossoms, a metaphor for fleeting life, or sneering at a rival clan's weakness with careful wordplay that cuts deeper than any blade. Poetry competitions, or uta awase, were popular, where samurai tested each other's wit and cultured finesse, blending artistry with subtle social maneuvering. Remember, a well composed verse could bolster your reputation as much as a well laid ambush. Historians still argue whether samurai poetry was genuinely heartfelt or often a form of performative virtue signaling, like ancient Twitter threads, but with more brushstrokes and fewer emojis. Some argue that this literary flair was a way for samurai to humanize themselves, distancing themselves from their brutal public duties. Others suggest poetry was another arena where social power was wielded, a kind of cultural jousting that required intellectual agility. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some samurai wrote kusa no ha poems, grass leaf poems, on actual leaves, folding nature into the art itself. Imagine that perfectly crafted haiku fading away as the leaf dries, a physical reminder of impermanence. It's the butterfly effect in poetic form, beautiful and ephemeral, which oddly parallels that tea bowl missing its chunk from yesterday's section. Beyond haikus, samurai sometimes composed cryptic poems infused with double meanings or coded language, almost like secret agent messages in calligraphy. These verses could convey clandestine political positions or personal grievances under the guise of innocent art. Think of it as ancient samurai sarcasm veiled in floral metaphors. Samurai poetry was heavily influenced by Zen Buddhism, emphasizing simplicity, nature, and the ephemerality of life. This often produced verses that were deceptively light but packed with philosophical heft. For example, a poem about a fleeting breeze or a solitary crow hopping along the frost might speak volumes about solitude, impermanence, or resignation. You can almost hear that soft ASMR whisper in the breeze as you read these writings. Interestingly, poetry was sometimes used therapeutically among samurai. Letters or verses written during times of grief or conflict offered emotional catharsis, a way to meditate on suffering without descending into despair. Some scholars suggest poetry helped samurai manage the psychological toll of their violent profession, though others debate whether these literary exercises truly alleviated trauma or merely masked it beneath refined language. Literary salons occasionally welcomed samurai from different clans who traded verses and ideas in an atmosphere that was partly cultural exchange, partly subtle political poker. Witty rhymes or clever poetic retorts could elevate a samurai's standing or quietly undermine an opponent's image without lifting a sword. One surprising detail is that some samurai used poetry as a tool to recruit loyalty and morale, embedding calls to valor or warnings within carefully crafted lines that appealed to shared cultural ideals. So, a poem wasn't just pretty words, it could be a call to arms cloaked in elegance. As you drift through this literary landscape, use your imagination to hear the scratch of a brush on paper, faint whispers by lantern light, and the quiet joy of a carefully chosen word striking like a well-timed parry. Poetry let samurai escape their iron corset of duty for moments of lyrical freedom, revealing a profoundly human side beneath the helmet. So, next time you cringe while reading a corny poem, remember these warrior poets who bled ink instead of blood, showing that even amidst war, there was room for beauty, wit, and fleeting joy in just 17 syllables. Now that you're basking in the gentle glow of samurai poetry, let's pivot to something a bit sharper, literally, the meticulous carification, care, and downright obsession with their swords. You probably think samurai just swung their katanas with reckless honor, but the truth is far more nuanced and sparkly. Samurai's relationship with their blades was a delicate dance of reverence, ritual, and practical necessity, and historians still argue whether this care was primarily spiritual devotion or an elite grooming routine veiled in symbolism. Picture this. You're a samurai, kneeling in your dimly lit chamber, night's quiet punctuated only by the soft scraping of polishing stones and the faint smell of choji oil, the secret sword conditioner that smells suspiciously like spicy pickled plum. Maintaining your sword wasn't just about keeping a weapon battle ready. It was a ritual that transcended daily hygiene. This was your soul's mirror, the steel that decided life or death, and it had to shine like a polished ego. Every morning or evening, the samurai would carefully disassemble the sword, the blade removed from its handle, the guard dusted, the edge examined for flaws, invisible to the untrained eye. They wielded a series of progressively finer stones, much like an ancient spa treatment for metal, until the blade gleamed with a mirror like finish capable of reflecting their very essence. If you thought this sounds like obsessive compulsive disorder with a katana, you're not far off, but it was considered an essential expression of discipline. Now, for the quirky twist, some samurai believed that blades absorbed the wearer's spirit, almost like an ancient Fitbit for your soul. This idea fueled endless debates. Was the sword truly a living entity, sensitive to its master's calm or fury, or was this just poetic license? There's even folklore about swords whispering advice or warnings to their owners, which, if true, makes you wonder whether the katana ever felt like the more responsible business partner. The maintenance process also involved meticulous cleaning to prevent rust, not something you want after a swampy battle. How often did they condition these blades? Imagine spending hours on a tool and feeling disappointment if a single fleck of dust settled. This ritual reminded the samurai daily of their code, Bushido, reinforcing values like patience and respect. Some argue, though, that this was less ritual and more a charming way to procrastinate during uneasy political times. You might be surprised to learn that sword polishing evolved into a respected art itself, passed down through generations. Takumi polisher clans became almost as famed as the swordsmiths, responsible for not just the blade's durability, but its aesthetic, swirling patterns in the steel called haida that shimmered under light, unique to each blade. These patterns were like the samurai's fingerprint. No two swords echoed exactly the same visual symphony. Historians still debate how much time samurai really devoted to this practice versus how much was exaggerated in storytelling. Was the daily polish a routine way to avoid boredom, or a deeply spiritual engagement between man and metal? Some records suggest that during war campaigns, swords gathered dust and grit, abandoned to practicality, while other sources swear by samurai never neglecting their blades. It's a historical squabble worthy of a courtroom drama, with spatulas replaced by katanas. And here's a delightful oddball fact. In some instances, samurai carried small nail sharpening kits with them on long travels, not just for themselves, but to help comrades keep weapons razor keen. These kits were transported in tiny, lacquered boxes that looked more like antique jewelry sets than military gear. Imagine a samurai pulling out a mini spa set mid-march for their katana. Talk about commitment to self-care. Beyond sword care, some samurai treated damaged weapons with rituals bordering on the mystical. Blades nicked or dulled in battle might undergo purification rites to cleanse any spiritual contamination. This entwining of the physical and the supernatural only deepens how much meaning was packed into sword maintenance. If you picture this obsessive polishing as a visual metaphor for the samurai themselves, constantly refining their skills and honor, smoothing rough edges, then you're right on target. Through the repetitive, calming act of buffing steel, they prepared not only their blades, but also their minds for the trials looming ahead. So when a samurai wasn't jousting adversaries or meditating under cherry blossoms, they were probably hunched over a whetstone, lovingly coaxing sharpness from cold steel as if it were a beloved pet. Which begs the question, who cared for the samurai's soul when the blade was polished spotless? Now, imagine yourself stepping out of that dim chamber filled with the faint scent of choji oil and kakishibu, a binding agent from persimmon tannins used in sword lacquer, and into the calm embrace of a meticulously curated garden where tiny, twisted trees and soft moss await your careful attention. This is no ordinary garden. It's a bonsai display, a miniature landscape that reflects the sweeping discipline of the samurai spirit. Gardening, especially bonsai cultivation, was a surprisingly significant occupation for samurai seeking inner peace and control amid the chaotic demands of warfare and political intrigue. You might imagine samurai as unshakable warriors solely focused on physical battles, but caring for a bonsai was one of their favorite ways to balance their temperaments and hone patience. Bonsai requires precision, a sharp eye for detail, and an understanding of nature's slow rhythms, traits that aligned perfectly with the samurai's code of patience and respect. The tiny branches became a metaphor. Just as a bonsai is shaped patiently over the years, so too was the samurai's character, refined incrementally. Oddly enough, bonsai culture wasn't an immediate fan favorite among all samurai. Some considered it a frivolous pastime, unworthy of a hardened warrior's time. Historians still argue whether bonsai gained popularity organically as a form of therapy or was a deliberate symbol of power, demonstrating endless control over life itself, bending nature to the will of the warrior class. It kind of sounds like the earliest form of high stakes arboreal micromanagement. Caring for bonsai demanded a highly ritualized approach, pruning every limb not just for aesthetics, but for symbolic reasons, shaping the tree to mimic natural forms of resilience. Under your fingertips, you might feel the gnarled bark, the texture of leaves that look impossibly tiny, yet are full of life and history. This act of shaping wasn't just botanical, it was a spiritual dialogue, an exchange where the samurai measured their patience against the tree's stubborn refusal to conform. In many cases, bonsai trees lived longer than the samurai wielding the sword, a living legacy that could be passed down through generations. Some samurai attached spiritual significance to these miniature forests, believing they absorbed the essence of their caretakers, much like that whispered blade you polished earlier. As these tiny trees thrived, so did the samurai's hope for endurance, control, and harmony in their own lives. Here's a quirky side note. Certain samurai even used bonsai trees as a subtle form of communication or status signaling. A well tended tree displayed in a garden could convey messages about the owner's wealth, artistic taste, or even political alliances. It was like the Instagram of feudal Japan, if Instagram involved earthen pots and months of careful trimming rather than filters and hashtags. In fact, bonsai aesthetics closely mirrored the wabi sabi philosophy: beauty and imperfection, impermanence and simplicity, that the samurai found comforting amid the transient nature of life and war. This mindset valued subtle asymmetry and minimalism, encouraging warriors to accept change while mastering their surroundings. Some samurai gardens grew elaborate enough to include tiny paths, gravel raked in uniform patterns, and small water features that added ambient trickling sounds. This multisensory experience was designed to calm the mind before meditation or battle preparation. You can almost hear the rough scrape of stones shifting underfoot, the gentle breeze brushing bonsai leaves, the faint scent of pine resin, its nature tailored to sharpen focus and soothe nerves. Interestingly, bonsai wasn't just a passion for higher ranking samurai. Records indicate even lower ranked warriors engaged in gardening, perhaps as a form of solace or an accessible creative outlet. This democratization implies that tending miniatures wasn't just about power, but a universal human attempt to find meaning and beauty amid harsh lives. And here's a fascinating debate among scholars. Were these gardens stricter symbols of control, reflecting the samurai's desire to master the unpredictable forces of life and war? Or were they organic expressions of humility and acceptance, humble testaments to the patience required to survive? The truth likely rides somewhere in that nuanced gray area, but exploring those tiny leaves feels like peeking into a hidden inner world. From battlefield chaos to miniature landscapes, bonsai offered samurai a rare chance to slow down, to nurture life in a controlled, satisfying way. It was the botanical equivalent of running your fingers over a perfectly polished katana, each leaf, each curve, a meditation on balance and beauty. So, next time you think of samurai as solely fierce warriors, picture them gently snipping a twisted branch, a single droplet of sap shining in the afternoon light, an act both delicate and defiant, a quiet rebellion against the chaos beyond the garden walls. Such moments helped forge the samurai's peace, one tiny leaf at a time. Stepping away from the calming influence of bonsai, you find yourself lacing up practical boots for the unpredictably rugged terrain of Japanese forests. Hunting was not just a pastime, but an important part of samurai life. When you think samurai, you might instantly picture swift sword strikes or perfect archery, but hunting, especially with falcons or bows, was a way to sharpen those skills under less stressful circumstances. It's like the warrior version of a weekend camping trip, complete with a healthy dose of adrenaline and the risk of ingesting something unidentifiable. Hunting trips could last for hours or even days, depending on the target and the season. The samurai's weapons would range from traditional yumi bows to carefully crafted spears, but the prevalence of falconry, training and hunting with birds of prey, is a quirkier and quite telling detail. Falconry was considered a noble pursuit, blending patience, skill, and a deep bond between human and animal. Watching a falcon swoop silently over the trees, backlit by dappled sunlight, you almost forget this practice was preparation for mortal combat. Or perhaps it was a way to contemplate death from a bird's eye view. Historians still argue whether samurai hunting was primarily practical, to provide food and maintain war readiness, or more of a sport steeped in ritual and social display. Some scholars suggest that hunting was a subtle way for samurai to assert their status. The size of the game you bagged might have been less important than the stories around the campfire afterward. So think of it as the original bragging rights competition. The hunting gear itself was a fascinating blend of function and ceremony. Bows might be intricately decorated, arrows feathered with precision, while hunting garments were tailored for stealth and comfort. The samurai's appreciation for craftsmanship didn't stop at their battlefield swords. Each tool had to be both beautiful and efficient. Imagine stepping through the brush with a perfectly balanced bow strapped to your back. It's a pretty stylish way to chase a deer, even if you have zero chance of surviving unscathed in a real fight. Hunting animals varied by region, season, and samurai rank. Deer and boar were common targets, but falcons might pursue everything from smaller songbirds to elusive waterfowl. Interestingly, falconry was sometimes employed in cooperative hunts, where multiple birds released simultaneously increased the chances of success. This strategy hinted at early teamwork models that we usually reserve for military drills, blurring the line between leisure and duty. One odd tidbit: some samurai practiced hunting with nets rather than weapons, targeting fish or small game, a recreational activity sometimes accompanied by elaborate feasts with sake afterward. These outdoor picnics combined the thrill of the chase with culinary luxury, a classic samurai balance of grit and indulgence. It's basically an ancient version of tailgating, minus the cars and questionable nachos. Hunting also carried deeper spiritual overtones. Killing an animal was an act not taken lightly. Ritual purification and recitations often followed a successful hunt, acknowledging respect for nature's sacrifices. This layer of reverence added a contemplative mood, reminding warriors of the thin line between survival and slaughter. Some scholars debate whether these rituals softened the psychological toll of taking life, or merely masked persistent internal conflicts. Moreover, hunting trips were invaluable social occasions. They strengthened bonds within samurai clans, allowed for relaxed strategizing far from court intrigues, and presented opportunities to teach younger samurai patience and resourcefulness. Imagine a soft autumn breeze, crackling firelight, and experienced warriors sharing wild tales, not the stiff, formal meetings most outsiders associate with the class. Interestingly, records mention instances where hunts doubled as covert military exercises. Some samurai used hunting grounds to train scouts or simulate enemy tracking, blurring the boundary between sport and preparation. It's like when your weekend hike suddenly becomes a survival skills boot camp. You can almost hear the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the distant call of a falcon, the tension just before releasing an arrow, a moment suspended between thrill and necessity. Hunting wasn't simply about filling stomachs. It was a dynamic arena where skill, patience, camaraderie, and philosophy all contested for dominance. So, next time you imagine samurai rigorously polishing swords or meditating silently, picture them crouched amidst wild underbrush, eyes narrowed, bow drawn, humming a hunting song lost to time. That blend of adrenaline, art, and ancient respect encapsulates another layer of the samurai's complex humanity. After the quiet focus of the hunt, You find yourself pulled indoors by the graceful sweep of brush against washi paper, the scent of ink mingling with tatami mats, a subtle summons to the world of calligraphy. Samurai weren't just hardened warriors. They wielded brushes with an elegance rivaling their swords, tracing strokes that spoke volumes beyond plain words. Calligraphy, or shodo, was more than handwriting. It was an extension of the samurai's discipline and soul. Imagine holding a brush dipped just so, feeling the resistance of the paper beneath the smooth brushstrokes, each character a dance frozen in ink. It's said the quality of a samurai's calligraphy revealed as much about his character and temperament as his skill in battle, cementing a connection between inner self and outward action. You probably wouldn't believe that these warriors spent countless hours perfecting kanji in styles from the bold kaisho to the fluid sosho, each demanding intense focus and control. And here's a quirky fact that might curl your brow. Some samurai reportedly used calligraphy practice as a form of martial training. How? The precise wrist movements to control a brush were thought to develop fine motor skills essential for swordsmanship. So, calligraphy could be seen as both an art and a secret workout routine for your fingers. The ink itself held symbolic weight. Black sumi pigments came from soot and animal glue, carefully prepared to achieve the perfect consistency and darkness. Vanilla or floral scents are sometimes added to ink or paper, enhancing the sensory ritual, a reminder that the act of writing was intimate, multisensory, and sacred. It's hard not to picture a samurai pausing to savor that fragrant pause before making the next deliberate stroke. Historians still argue whether the samurai's calligraphy was mostly a practical tool for correspondence or a cultivated art form that expressed their aesthetic and philosophical values. Certainly, some samurai became renowned for their calligraphy, and those pieces were treasured heirlooms, passed down as family legacy. Another strange but delightful anecdote: there were calligraphy contests where samurai would compete not only on technical skill, but also on how creatively they could bend, stretch, or play with characters. So, sort of like ancient handwriting freestyle. Sometimes they incorporated visual poetry or hidden meanings, a nod to their subtle wit or sharper political cracks. Imagine a contest where the winner is the samurai who can cleverly sneak in a pun about the shogun's hat size. Classy yet cheeky. But calligraphy also functioned as an exercise in mindfulness. The slow, deliberate brushstrokes mirrored meditation practices, helping sharpen focus and calm the mind after a taxing day. You've heard how sword and calligraphy were like yin and yang, one violent, one serene, but both demanding discipline, patience, and respect for tradition. The practice was a way for warriors to reconcile their dual natures, protector and poet. The samurai's correspondence was often inscribed with beautiful seals, personal marks that authenticated writings and could subtly represent their moral or political stance. Some seals incorporated animals, mythical creatures, or auspicious symbols, further weaving identity and status into every letter or poem. Your imagination runs wild, picturing those custom stamps pressed into red cinnabar ink, sealing stories, or even secret scheming. An odd fringe tidbit involves the use of calligraphy in deception. Documents and letters sometimes contained cryptic characters or deliberately altered strokes as covert signals. These hidden messages reveal the shadowy world samurai navigated. Trust was scarce, and words could be weapons as sharp as any katana. Even the tools, brushes carved from deer hair or boar bristles, delicate inkstones for grinding, reflected samurai appreciation for craftsmanship. Collecting and using fine tools was a point of pride, reminding anyone who watched that artistry wasn't just a city affair, but deeply entwined with warrior identity. So, next time you flick through elegant kanji on an ancient manuscript, remember the samurai behind those strokes. Men who balanced fierceness with finesse, whose ink whispers as powerfully as a battle cry. Calligraphy wasn't simply scribbling paper, it was the brushstroke heartbeat of an era where art and war collided with astonishing grace. Now, leave the gentle ink strokes behind and imagine yourself seated around a low wooden table, the air thick with anticipation and the faint aroma of incense. You're surrounded by other samurai, faces flushed not from battle, but the thrill of a different kind of contest gambling. Yes, beneath their armor and stoic facades, samurai had a penchant for games of chance and strategy that could test both their luck and cunning. You might think that gambling was just a silly pastime for idle warriors, but it was often deeply embedded in samurai culture, serving as a social glue and even a nerve calming ritual before or after tense days. Traditional games like Hanafuda, playing with beautifully illustrated cards, or Chohan, a simple dice game, were common. These games weren't just about winning, they were about reading opponents, bluffing, and maintaining cool under pressure, almost like a battle of wits without swords drawn. Here's a quirky twist to mull over. Some samurai developed elaborate systems to cheat subtly in these gambling games, using coded signals or sleight of hand tricks passed down like trade secrets. Think of it as ninja level card manipulation, but with the stakes often more social than fiscal. Of course, that if caught, consequences could swiftly turn a fun evening into a serious breach of honor. Nobody wanted a gambling scandal on their record. Historians still argue whether gambling among samurai was an occasional diversion or a more pervasive habit, sometimes leading to serious debt and scandal within elite circles. Some documents speak of samurai who gambled away fortunes or family estates, while others suggest strict regulations enforced by clan leaders to curb excess and preserve dignity. You'll find variations in gambling styles reflecting regional flair and the period's evolving tastes. For example, the Edo period saw a rise in more complex card games compared to earlier times when dice were favored. There's also evidence of samurai inventing their own games, combining elements of chance with strategic moves, blurring the lines between luck and skill. One surprisingly delightful detail is that gambling wasn't always secretive or hush-hush. Sometimes it was a communal affair during festivals or after battles, a way to bond and decompress. Imagine groups of weathered warriors laughing softly over a dice roll or groaning when fate flips against them, all under the shadow of Japan's strict class and honor codes. As a side note, gambling often dovetailed with sake drinking, fueling camaraderie, and occasionally heated disputes that required delicate mediation. That soft background hum we talked about earlier, well, now it's probably mingled with bouts of laughter and occasional groans of frustration as luck chooses its favorites cruelly. Interestingly, some samurai believed that gambling could teach valuable life lessons. By embracing risk and accepting losses gracefully, they honed their mental toughness, a trait crucial on the battlefield as much as at the gaming table. So, in a strange way, what seems like mere entertainment was sometimes elevated to a philosophical exercise. That said, not all samurai approved. Some older or more austere figures viewed gambling as a dangerous descent into vice and distraction, a temptation that could unravel even the strongest of wills. This division adds to the layered character of samurai society as you imagine whispered admonishments mixed with furtive dice rolls. On a more eccentric note, one samurai gambling story involves a prank where players swapped dice made from fish bones, which would melt or warp if exposed to moisture, or when the dice rolling samurai started sweating nervously. This odd trickery underscores just how relaxed or playful the mood could be after stiff days of fighting and formality. Of course, beneath the light-hearted gambling scenes, the stakes often carried weight. Bets could involve favors, goods, or even promises of future allies in political machinations, words whispered between rounds about loyalties or grudges that mattered beyond the game's surface. So, the next time you think about samurai merely as grim sword masters, picture them carefully selecting cards or nervously tossing dice, navigating another kind of risk with equal intensity. Their gambling wasn't just frivolity, it was a dance of chance, strategy, and human frailty in a world tightly wound by honor and expectation. You're leaning back against the polished wood of a tatami mat room, the gentle twang of a shamisen wafting through the air, creating a space where martial discipline softens just a bit into something deeply human. For the samurai, music wasn't merely a background decoration, it was a vital thread woven into their complex lives, a balancing act between the brutal demands of battle and the soothing balm of art. The shamisen, that three-stringed lute with its distinctively hollow, percussive sound, often took center stage. Picture a samurai plucking its strings with practiced ease, the notes rippling through the air like whispered secrets. It's a striking image because the fierce warrior we imagine was equally capable of crafting delicate melodies, blending masculinity with sensitivity, a duality that fascinates modern listeners. Yet historians still argue whether samurai truly immersed themselves in music as passionate enthusiasts, or if playing instruments was more about maintaining appearances and fulfilling cultural expectations. Some argue it was a genuine outlet of solace and self-expression, while others suggest it was an extension of their status and a polite performance in social settings. A quirky fact to ponder. Some samurai believed that particular chords or tunes could influence a warrior's spirit, invoking courage or calm before a fight. This kind of sound therapy might seem avant garde for its era, but in many ways, it resonates with modern understandings of music's psychological power. In fact, courts often commissioned compositions designed to inspire specific emotions. Call it the music version of battlefield pep talks. Music was also a form of social currency. Learning to play or compose well enough to impress your comrades or superiors was a subtle way to gain respect without unsheathing a sword. Alongside their poetry and calligraphy, these artistic skills rounded out the samurai's public image, making them not just skilled killers, but cultured members of their class. Imagine, too, how music might have punctuated quiet evenings or banquets, providing a space where rivalries softened and laughter, sometimes tinged with melancholy, filled the room. There's even evidence that some samurai engaged in musical duels, improvising on their shamisen to outplay each other in front of audiences, mixing competitive spirit with artistic playfulness. Now, if the idea of outlawed warriors passionately strumming instruments feels surprising, here's an even stranger tidbit. Some samurai were rumored to use certain musical notes as coded messages in covert operations. Imagine a battle hymn doubling as an espionage technique, a kind of sonic spycraft embedded in cultural rituals. Yet it wasn't always harmonious. In some records, music was linked to overindulgence, with excessive playing and drunken revelry occasionally causing friction with the rigid discipline samurai were supposed to embody. Scholars debate whether these artistic pursuits contributed positively to mental health or distracted from the harsh realities of their roles. In Japan's layered and often contradictory samurai world, the presence of music reveals a nuanced humanity behind the polished armor and ruthless drills. It's the quiet reminder that beneath every swift katana stroke was a heartbeat attuned not just to war, but to beauty and expression. So, next time you tap your foot to a catchy tune or quietly strum an instrument yourself, think of those samurai shaking off the dust of battle to find harmony in strings and songs, their secret refuge from a world demanding stoic perfection. You find yourself inking deeper into a dimly lit chamber, the flickering shadows cast by candlelight dancing off the paper walls, wrapping you in a cocoon of stillness. Here, the samurai sit cross-legged, eyes gently closed, a world away from the rigid discipline of training yards and clangs of steel, right in the sanctuary of meditation. This isn't just a quick moment of calm, but a profound practice, long believed to prepare a warrior's mind for the chaos ahead. Meditation, or zazen in the samurai's world, was more than a mystical hobby. It was a fundamental pillar of their discipline. You can almost hear the rhythmic cadence of breath in the silence, a steady anchor amid stormy thoughts. This focus on mindfulness helped samurai center themselves, sharpening their mental edge at least as much as their swords. But historians still argue whether meditation served more as spiritual preparation or as a pragmatic technique for stress and fear management. Imagine yourself sitting perfectly still, each breath echoing the gentle rise and fall of your chest, training your mind not to lash out at passing fears or doubts, but to merely observe them. untouched, a surprising twist? Some samurai actually adopted Zen Buddhist principles, but didn't necessarily become strict monks. They integrated mindfulness into their very identity, walking a razor's edge between enlightenment and deadly combat. Voice in your mind whispers, this wasn't yoga with incense and soft music, but hard focus, intense self discipline. The emphasis was on no mind, mushin, a state where the warrior's thoughts dissolve, allowing instinct and training to take over in battle without hesitation. It's the mental equivalent of autopilot, but one that takes years of practice to install. Here's an odd tidbit you might not expect. Some samurai tackled suicidally high pressure meditation sessions, sitting for hours in freezing silence to steel their nerves, often while feeling the sun burn or the rain drip silently upon their skin. This was no fluffy New Age chill out. It was endurance training for the spirit, proof that the mind, like the body, could and needed to be honed. Yet the debates persist. Did this meditation reduce trauma, helping samurai face inevitable death with calm? Or did it contribute to the strict emotional repression that made some warriors more tragic than tranquil? It's an open scholarly question. Some records show samurai employing meditation to dissociate during battles, while others hint at the practice causing deep existential conflict. Oddly enough, meditation wasn't confined to solitary moments. In some instances, groups meditated together before engaging in discussions or war councils, using collective calm to foster unity and a clear strategy. It's less dramatic than swords clashing, but equally powerful in setting a battlefield mood. Beyond mental toughness, meditation had a social layer. Samurai who mastered it gained status. Their calmness was proof of inner strength, a trait highly prized in any warrior culture. Imagine the quiet nods of respect when a young recruit first demonstrates that rare serenity under pressure. If you squint, this practice might even resemble today's mindfulness apps and breathing exercises. Except instead of scrolling on your phone, samurai sat to train for life and death encounters. Consider that when your phone distracts you from stress, samurai were intentionally facing it, sitting in silence, confronting their fears directly. And about the spiritual side, while meditation has religious roots, many samurai approached it pragmatically, as a tool to enhance focus, not necessarily as a path to spiritual awakening. A fine distinction, but important, reminding us that their rituals were tailored for ruthless efficiency, not fluffy enlightenment. So now, as you imagine the samurai, calm and seated, you glimpse a paradox. These fierce warriors embraced stillness not to escape chaos, but to conquer it from within. This quiet strength, softly humming beneath all the battlefield thunder, helped turn raw adrenaline into razor-sharp clarity. Think of meditation as the invisible armor for the samurai's soul, quiet, unyielding, and fundamentally human. After all, even the harshest warrior needs moments when the only fight is to keep the mind from slipping into panic. You rise from the quiet meditation chamber and find yourself stepping into a lively, inviting room filled with the warm glow of paper lanterns and the rich aroma of roasted chestnuts, grilled fish, and richly spiced sake. Here, the samurai gather not on the battlefield, but around low wooden tables groaning under lavish spreads. Communal feasts are more than mere meals. They are highly social events layered with meaning, subtle power plays, and a chance to cement bonds beyond the sword. Picture this: warriors sitting side by side in their silk robes, laughing lightly, lifting cups and clinking toasts, their faces flushed with the warmth of communal joy and perhaps sake. Yet, beneath all this conviviality lies a keen awareness that these meals are also political theaters. Feasts serve as a kind of proxy battlefield where alliances are forged or hinted at, trust tested, and social hierarchies subtly reinforced. Historians still argue whether these gatherings functioned more as genuine relaxation or as strategic networking events designed to keep power solid. Oddly enough, these group meals can sometimes look like the wild office holiday parties you dread: overindulgence, forced jolliness, and not so hidden rivalry laughs. But the samurai had strict etiquette rules enforcing respect, even amid their laughter, shaping class distinctions down to which dish you were served or how you accepted rice bowls and cups. Social status was literally dished out from the same tray. The food itself tells stories. Imagine biting into freshly steamed rice, perfectly sticky, paired with salted fish caught that morning or wild vegetables picked from the nearby mountain slopes. Recipes were seasonal and regional, with flavors reflecting both local bounty and the samurai's personal preferences. And yes, many samurai had a surprisingly sophisticated palate considering their warrior image. An obscure tidbit here: some feasts featured kaimyo sake, a type of sake brewed specifically for memorial ceremonies, but sometimes sneakily consumed in these parties, adding an undercurrent of solemnity mixed with merriment, a reminder that even in celebration, death was never far from their minds. You can almost hear the banter slipping beneath the polite surface: who's recently gained favor with the daimyo, whose lordship's army showed weaker discipline this campaign, or who's quietly plotting an elevation in rank. Letters and secret glances may as well have been weapons wielded alongside sharpened steel. These feasts were as much about information exchange as about food. Food customs carried symbolism too. Sharing a bowl of rice was a sacred gesture of trust. Refusing to drink with a fellow samurai could spell enmity, while deftly pouring sake for others demonstrated grace and leadership. These rituals underpin the wider culture of honor that samurai navigated every day. Weirdly, despite the strict formality, some samurai embraced rowdier celebrations, enjoying games or even playful teasing, showing a side rarely captured in stoic portraits. Imagine a tense battlefield commander secretly delighting in a drunken joke, momentarily shedding the weight of his grim duties. Social historians still debate how much these communal feasts genuinely offered respite versus reinforcing rigid hierarchies. Did samurai relax enough to let their guard down, or was every smile a chess move? Probably both, in the complicated dance of warrior life. Feasting also marked seasonal milestones, harvests, victories, or religious observances, linking the samurai to the rhythms of agrarian Japan. Food tied them to the land they swore to defend, a grounding reality beneath all the talk of honor and war. A quirky pinch. In some regions, samurai feasts featured namako mushrooms, small slippery fungi thought to boost vitality, basically an ancient version of energy drinks, samurai style, perhaps as adding a little pep to their after dinner speeches or discreet challenges to drinking contests. The drinking itself was a performance, with pouring and receiving sake governed by complex etiquette rules, keeping everyone mindful of respect even while loosening social inhibitions. This balance was tricky. One wrong move could cause offense, or worse, social exile. Now, as you watch the flicker of candlelight reflecting off lacquered bowls and silk kimono patterns, the feast feels like a living tableau of samurai life's softer but equally complex side. Not just warriors, but men navigating friendships, rivalries, and ambitions over shared meals. This humanizes these formidable figures, reminding you that beneath the armor and battle cries were people who laughed, argued, celebrated, and ate just like anyone else. Food fueled not only their bodies, but also the intricate social tapestry that underpinned their world. So, next time you imagine a samurai, think beyond the sword and war cry. Picture the shared feast, the clinking cups, and the silent communications happening over bowls of rice, each bite steeped in tradition, politics, and camaraderie. You move from the warm glow of the feast into a quieter, more contemplative workshop space, a room filled with wooden tables, scattered tools, and the faint scent of freshly carved wood and lightly oiled metal. Here, samurai engage in craftsmanship far beyond the famed katana that defines their very image. Making and repairing weapons, as well as crafting utilitarian tools, is another hobby, and one that blurs the line between necessity and artistry. You might think that samurai left this kind of work to specialized artisans, but many took great pride in their ability to shape and fine tune smaller arms or accessories for battle, blending practical skill with an aesthetic eye. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or mostly limited to certain clans that emphasized self reliance. Still, there's something satisfying about picturing a warlord painstakingly adjusting the balance on a wakizashi or short sword rather than only issuing orders. Consider the variety of craftsmanship involved. Arrows were carefully fletched and inspected for perfect flight. Bows were not only tools of war, but objects of smooth, deliberate construction, reflecting natural curves and strength. Some samurai even crafted their own armor components or improved upon existing gear to better fit their style. This hands on approach wasn't just practical, it was part of a mindset that respected mastery over all facets of combat. Oddly, samurai crafting sometimes included more domestic items, like woodworking for lacquer boxes or small decorative utensils. This crossover into everyday object making underscores how deeply intertwined their identity was with discipline and perfection. The act of crafting, with its focus on detail and patience, offered a kind of meditative break from the chaos and violence they were trained for. There's a quirky tale that some samurai practiced tanto making, the dagger favored for close combat, in secret workshops within their homes, treating it almost like a sacred art form. Legend has it that the blade's creator's personality could somehow bleed into the weapon, giving it a unique soul. While fanciful, this belief shows the near spiritual reverence for quality and personalization in samurai crafts. But not all craftsmanship was about weapons. Some samurai worked on horse tack, perfecting leather saddles, bridles, and reins that balanced function with elegance. Horses were pivotal to samurai warfare, and command over their gear reflected a samurai's overall preparedness. Crafting these items required a combination of technical skill and deep knowledge of animal behavior. Now, you might wonder, did samurai workshops rival those of full-time artisans? Probably not. Artisans had access to specialized training and materials. Yet, samurai involvement in crafting was as much about identity as output. Engaging directly reinforced self-sufficiency and kept their minds sharp when not engaged in battle or court affairs. Another fascinating bit. Some research suggests samurai might have experimented with early forms of gunpowder weaponry, maintenance, and modification, balancing emerging technologies with traditional arms. The integration of new weapons challenged the old ways, spurring crafty adaptations, an interesting historical tension. Craftsmanship was also tightly connected to the samurai's code of honor, the bushido. The care invested in weapon making and upkeep symbolized respect for one's tools, opponents, and self. Neglecting this was seen as a lapse in discipline and dignity. At the same time, the intimate act of creation could subtly express personality or even unspoken emotions. Historians ponder whether such hobbies were encouraged by daimyo as training extensions or were pursuits that samurai took up purely from personal interest. Perhaps both. These crafts gave samurai a sense of control and creativity within a system often dominated by rigid hierarchies and strict duties. Imagine now being surrounded by the quiet clinks of metal parts, the sharp rustle of wood shavings falling to the floor, and the faint grind of sharpening stones. A calm workspace where focus sharpens like the very edges being honed. It's a stark contrast to the battlefield, yet intimately connected to it. Crafting also forged social ties. Samurai might share tips or collaborate on repairs, strengthening camaraderie within their ranks away from violent encounters. It was a quieter kind of teamwork, emphasizing patience and precision. Lastly, in an almost poetic twist, some scholars suggest the patience required in crafting was psychological training, teaching samurai the value of steady hands and calm minds under pressure, qualities indispensable in combat. So, your tool-making hobby isn't just fun, it's the mental dojo. So next time you picture a samurai, imagine not only the fierce warrior, but also the meticulous craftsman, someone who finds balance and purpose in shaping wood, leather, and steel, blending artistry with utility while preparing body and mind for what lies ahead. As you step away from the calming ritual of shaping blades and leather, you find yourself sitting at a small wooden desk inkstone and brush within easy reach. Letters and correspondence, words carefully penned and folded, were another pastime for the samurai, but they weren't just casual notes or greetings. Writing meant wielding diplomacy, spinning gossip, and, in some whispered corners, crafting secret codes. This blending of communication and strategy shows that samurai wielded not only swords, but words as deftly as warriors. Imagine the feel of the crisp paper between your fingers, the scratch of a brush on the fibers, the art of calligraphy already explored, but now you delve deeper into the message's content. Samurai letters often carried weight far beyond the personal, functioning as tools for negotiating alliances, issuing veiled threats, or maintaining social status. They were a form of power play disguised as formal etiquette. Historians still argue whether the samurai's letter writing skills were genuinely widespread or mainly confined to the educated elite within their ranks. Certainly, literacy was prized, and many samurai undertook rigorous training in literature and rhetoric, but the question lingers: was letter writing a true pastime or merely an extension of their official responsibilities? Beyond official matters, samurai letters reveal revealing glimpses into daily life and personality. Some included playful teasing or subtle critiques penned to close friends or rivals, encoding meaning with a wink and a flourish. An infamous story tells of a samurai who sent a letter so cleverly written in cryptic metaphor that the recipient initially thought it was a riddle, only to discover it was a thinly veiled warning. The content often veered into philosophical musings or reflections on current events, demonstrating samurai intellectual engagement beyond brute force. You can almost hear whispers through the parchment, the clack of a sliding door as a messenger arrives, the careful unsealing of wax, the furtive glance to ensure nobody else is watching while reading. Interestingly, some samurai developed ciphers and hidden meanings in their writing, essentially early forms of encryption. Secret messages, tucked inside seemingly harmless correspondence, allowed for covert communication during political upheaval or war. It's akin to a real world spy thriller, but with beautifully scripted kanji. Correspondence also functioned as a social glue. Invitations to tea ceremonies, announcements of births or deaths, or news about battlefield victories traveled this way, connecting distant clans or family members. Losing a letter was no mere inconvenience. It could disrupt alliances or insult honor. One fun footnote: some samurai were notorious for their florid handwriting styles that bordered on calligraphic showmanship, almost like graffiti artists leaving personal tags, but with ink and tradition. These flamboyant letters were said to boost morale or intimidate foes by showcasing intellect alongside martial prowess. You may wonder, were samurai secretly enjoying their literary hobbies, or was this just an arduous duty? Some scholars propose that the writing process became a quiet escape, a means of shaping thoughts into art or weaponizing phrasing with a touch of elegant sarcasm, possibly a way to let off steam while still appearing refined. The role of letters in espionage and psychological warfare also points out something deeper, that samurai culture was not just about direct confrontation, but layered strategy and subtle influence. Iron meets paper in the dance of power and persuasion. Imagine a scene, a samurai carefully composing a letter by flickering candlelight, weighing each word with precision, knowing that a misplaced phrase could spark war or peace. The tension and artistry combined make letter writing feel almost like a battlefield in its own right, quiet, cerebral, and high stakes. So, the next time you think of samurai correspondence, picture letters as more than mere scripts. They were tools of control, vessels of trust, and sometimes the deadliest weapons of all. As the sun dips behind distant hills, casting long shadows over the sprawling villages and castle towns where samurai reside, you find yourself drawn toward the lively sounds of music, laughter, and the murmur of crowds, the unmistakable hum of festivals and celebrations. Despite their rigid codes and military duties, samurai didn't exist in a vacuum of seriousness. They actively took part in various festivals where joy, ritual, and social games blended seamlessly. These celebrations weren't just mindless parties, but layered events deeply entwined with cultural duties, religious observances, and power displays. Walking among paper lanterns, swaying gently in evening breezes, the scent of grilled fish and sweet rice cakes mixing in the air, it's easy to forget that samurai, in full regalia or in more casual robes, were present not as mere spectators, but key figures. You probably won't survive a month in the historical samurai lifestyle if you don't understand the critical importance of public image and honor, and festivals were the perfect stage for this theatrical role. Samurai used these occasions to cement alliances through toasts and shared dances, subtly demonstrate wealth or virtue through their attire and conduct, and even engage in a little friendly competition, whether in archery contests or elegant poetry recitals. Historians still argue whether the level of enthusiasm the samurai had for these festivals was a genuine release from their harsh lives or simply another arena for social posturing. It's tempting to see samurai celebrating as simply letting loose, but many festivals were tightly regulated affairs, demanding equal parts performance and participation. One quirky tidbit: some samurai developed a strange habit of mixing their armor elements with traditional festival garments. Think iron gauntlets paired with silk kimonos, blurring the line between warrior and reveler, a striking visual that purportedly was intimidating enough to influence potential rivals lurking in the crowd. The festivals themselves often marked significant agricultural cycles, religious holidays, or historical commemorations, blending Shinto rituals with folklore, music, and dance. Central to these were communal food feasts. Think sticky rice, grilled eel, mochi sweets that were both celebratory and symbolic, renewing bonds between samurai households and the peasantry below. At night, the streets would glow from bonfires and fireworks, with groups of samurai sometimes leading processions or hosting their own exclusive gatherings away from prying eyes. This dual aspect, a public spectacle alongside behind the scenes politicking, is a recurring theme in samurai social life. The interplay between sacred ritual and secular fun often gave rise to playful mischief. A well known festival prank among samurai involved choreographing mock duels or eccentric dances designed to poke fun at strict social rules, sort of like medieval cosplay, but with considerably higher stakes. You might wonder how samurai with intense schedules could find time for such revelry. Part of it reflects the complexity of their identities. Beneath their stoic exterior lurked a desire for camaraderie, amusement, and sometimes a break from the moral rigidity imposed by Bushido. The festivals provided a sanctioned outlet for these impulses. Interestingly, samurai participation varied by region and era. While some clans were famous for extravagant festival sponsorship, others preferred more subdued or austere observances. This regional variation adds a colorful texture to the overall picture of samurai leisure. Even some historical records hint at political intrigue, simmering beneath festival masks, messages whispered between hot sake sips, alliances forged under lantern light, or rumors spread through carefully woven festival performances. It wasn't all song and dance. Sometimes these gatherings set the stage for future conflicts or peace treaties. One particularly bizarre example involved a ghost festival where samurai hosted theatrical performances featuring tales of fallen warriors, blending grief, superstition, and subtle propaganda. Audience members were said to leave disturbed, yet oddly inspired, a reminder of the spiritual layers under the festive veneer. As you stroll down a festival lane, the smell of incense and roasted chestnuts tickling your nose, remember that samurai festivals were multifaceted, equal parts relaxation, societal obligation, and conspicuous display. They were crucial in maintaining the balance of honor, hierarchy, and humanity. So, the next time you think of samurai as stoic sword wielders, picture them laughing under lantern light, sharing plum wine, and dancing in the streets, proving even the most disciplined warrior needs a good party now and then. Night has settled deep, the cool air thick with a twilight hush that drapes over the samurai's world like a silken shroud. As the last echoes of festival drums fade into the distance and the clinking of sake cups softens to a murmur, you find yourself slipping into those quieter, more introspective hours, the nighttime reflections that samurai cherished. It's here, in the gentle dimness before sleep, claims their weary forms, that their intricate, often conflicted inner lives unravel in the solace of silence. You probably won't survive this nocturnal solitude as a samurai without confronting the complex web of honor, duty, and human vulnerability coiled tightly within their minds. This moment, suspended just before they close their eyes, is a sacred reprieve, a time for reckoning with the day's burdens, fears, and hopes whispering in the spaces between thoughts. Picture yourself sitting cross legged beside a small oil lamp, its soft glow casting trembling shadows on wooden walls adorned with calligraphy scrolls. The scent of cooled incense mingles with the faint residue of sweat soaked into silk robes during the day. Your breath slows to match the precision and calm cultivated through years of meditation and practice. Such is the atmosphere where samurai allowed themselves the rare gift of contemplation. Historians still argue whether these moments were used primarily for spiritual purification, a mental preparation for the uncertainties of tomorrow, or a genuine emotional outlet where repressed anxieties slipped through the rigid cracks of Bushido discipline. Perhaps it was a little of both. Amid these whispers of thought, samurai might revisit the day's battles, not only the clashing steel and strategy, but the tensions of alliances tested, family expectations weighing heavily, and fleeting glimpses of tenderness often hidden beneath the warrior's stern exterior. The mind cycles through regrets over missed chances and silent hopes pinned on a peaceful future, all framed by a constant undercurrent of mortality. One quirky detail from warrior biographies reveals some samurai kept journals or letter fragments at bedside, writing secret messages or lines of poetry to capture fleeting insights in the half light, a practice that blends the literary with the practical, preserving thoughts no one else would see. These scribbles were sometimes smuggled to loved ones the next day or kept as personal sacred relics. In this liminal space, questions surface. Did I uphold my honor today? Could I have shown mercy where I shouldn't? Will my family be safe? These reflections could spin into spirals of self-doubt or quiet resolve, but always carried the weight of an impending dawn and its unknown trials. Interestingly, the samurai way emphasized not just physical stamina, but mental fortitude. Nighttime rituals often included reciting sutras or performing breathing exercises, echoes of Zen influences, to steady fractured thoughts and calm restless spirits before surrendering to sleep. Your surroundings might be sparse, a tatami mat, a paper screen gently rustling in the breeze, the distant cry of an owl punctuating the calm. This serenity contrasts sharply with the fiery chaos of daytime battles or political scheming, creating a fragile balance between warrior and man. This quiet solitude was a paradox, both a shield against vulnerability and a doorway to deeper self-awareness. For samurai, the night was not merely a pause, but an essential part of their lifelong training, a chance to align the spirit with the code they lived by and brace for the cycle of conflict and peace that tomorrow would bring. There's a poignant irony here. The very warriors famed for their stoicism and ferocity found their softest, most human moments alone at night, attempting to quiet the relentless storm inside. It's a reminder that beneath the polished armor and commanding presence was a heart that wrestled with fear, hope, and the profound need for meaning. As your eyelids grow heavy, the lamp flickers low, and the room softens into shadow, you drift alongside these ancient warriors into the embrace of night, a shared space of rest, reflection, and gentle surrender.